The civil lawsuit filed against Garth Brooks yesterday in California makes multiple serious allegations against the singer, allegations that Brooks says he is incapable of. A warning, some of the alleged details are graphic and disturbing.
He was supposed to be untouchable. For years, Garth Brooks wasn't just country music's biggest star. He changed what country music could be. He packed stadiums, shattered sales records, and became one of the best-selling solo artists in history. His concerts felt more like rock spectacles than traditional country shows, turning him into a cultural phenomenon that reached far beyond Nashville. But success on that scale comes with a price. Behind the sold-out tours and historic achievements was a man struggling to balance superstardom with being a husband and father. At 64, Garth Brooks' story isn't simply about fame. It's about ambition, sacrifice, reinvention, heartbreak, and the controversies that have complicated one of country music's greatest legacies: setbacks and scandal. The Ireland chapter is one of those moments where a single event carries far more weight than the facts alone might suggest. 5 concerts were announced in Dublin. Around 400,000 tickets were sold. The demand was huge. The enthusiasm was undeniable. This was supposed to be one of the major international highlights of his return. Instead, it became a public mess. Local objections surfaced. Permits became an issue. Only 2 permits were approved, and then the entire plan started collapsing under the pressure of logistics, politics, and public frustration. What made it even more painful was Brooks's refusal to play fewer than all 5 shows. From his perspective, the decision made sense. He didn't want to choose which fans got rewarded and which fans got left behind. He didn't want to create a situation where some people got the full experience and others got nothing. That was part principle, part fairness, part emotional stubbornness. He was trying to protect the integrity of the event, but in the end, that integrity couldn't save the shows. And when the cancellation hit, Brooks described it as feeling like a death in the family. That language is why the moment still sticks. It wasn't just about ticket sales or scheduling. It was about the emotional collapse of something he had invested himself in. The Ireland disappointment became another reminder that even a career as powerful as his could still be interrupted by forces no amount of fame could control. That loss stayed with him. But not every collapse happens on a stage. Some collapse in a courtroom. In 2024, Garth Brooks found himself facing serious legal allegations when a former hairstylist and makeup artist filed a sexual assault lawsuit against him. Brooks denied the allegations. He pushed back hard. He described the claims as false and framed them as a form of extortion or a shakedown. That denial did not make the story disappear. If anything, it intensified the public response. People immediately split into camps. Some believed the allegations deserved serious scrutiny. Others focused on Brooks's denial and the impact on his reputation. Social media did what social media does best. It turned a complex legal matter into a heated public argument before the case had been resolved. And that's one of the reasons this chapter matters so much in the broader story. Because it changes the legacy conversation. When an artist has already spent decades building an image of sincerity, family loyalty, and emotional openness, a legal scandal forces the public to reevaluate what they thought they knew. It doesn't erase the music. It doesn't erase the accomplishments. But it does complicate the memory. And at 64, complication matters, because this is the stage of life when people usually want clarity, not chaos. They want the story to settle. They want the legacy to harden into something clean and understandable. Instead, Brooks found himself in a public battle that added another layer of uncertainty to an already complicated life. The case also reminded everyone that fame does not freeze reality. It only magnifies it. The rise. Before the stadium lights, before the platinum records, before millions of people were singing his songs back to him, Garth Brooks was just a kid from Oklahoma trying to find his way. He was born in Tulsa and raised in a family where music and discipline both mattered. His father had a military background and musical talent. His mother also had experience as a singer. So music wasn't some random dream that appeared out of nowhere. It was part of the air he breathed growing up. Still, growing up around music is not the same as becoming one of the biggest musicians in the world. That part had to be earned, and Garth earned it in the most old-fashioned way possible, by working for it. He went to Oklahoma State University. He played clubs. He kept showing up. He kept trying to get better. He kept believing he could build something, even if the early stages didn't look glamorous. That matters because when people later looked at him as a finished superstar, they sometimes forgot the long road that came before it. They saw the polished icon and not the guy who had to grind his way through the early years when nobody was promising him success. That early struggle shaped him. It gave him patience, but it also gave him hunger. And hungry artists tend to do something the comfortable ones don't. They push. They take risks. They test the edges. They refuse to stay in the safe lane if they believe there's a bigger stage somewhere else. That instinct would become one of the biggest reasons Garth Brooks changed country music forever. But before the world knew that, he had to go through the part almost every future legend goes through. The years when you're good, but not yet undeniable. The years when every booking matters. The years when every crowd feels like a test. The years when you're not famous enough to be comfortable, but committed enough not to quit. But surviving Oklahoma was one thing. Could he survive Nashville? When Garth moved to Nashville in the mid-1980s, he wasn't arriving as a superstar. He was arriving as a hopeful musician trying to break in. Nashville was crowded with talent, and nobody was handing out miracles. That city had a way of sorting people fast. Either you had something unique, or you got swallowed up by the noise. At first, he was just another singer trying to get noticed. That's the part of the story people skip too quickly. They jump straight from local guy from Oklahoma to global icon, but the middle matters. Garth spent real time playing clubs, performing in smaller venues, building a reputation the hard way. He wasn't being sold as a finished package. He had to become one. And once he started getting traction, it became clear that he wasn't built like the average country act. He had energy, unusual energy, the kind that made people stop and look. He didn't perform like a singer waiting for the band to catch up. He performed like somebody trying to drag the audience into the song with him. He moved across the stage. He climbed. He ran. He used the entire space like he was trying to turn every concert into a moment people would remember. That style mattered because country music at the time still had a more traditional presentation. A lot of artists were leaning toward a simpler, more controlled image. Garth came in with something else. He brought movement. He brought spectacle. He brought a rock and roll sense of scale into a genre that was still being told to stay small. And that's what made him different. His first album didn't instantly turn him into a household name. The success was not overnight, in the way people sometimes imagine. But the pieces were there. The songs connected. The touring built momentum. The crowds got bigger. The name started spreading. And once that engine began to move, it didn't stop easily. The real story of Garth Brooks's rise is not that he was handed the throne. It's that he built a machine strong enough to take it. Breaking the rules. What made Garth Brooks so disruptive wasn't just how much success he had. It was how he changed the rules while he was getting there. Country music had seen stars before, but Garth challenged the image of what a country star was supposed to look and sound like. He wore jeans, not the polished rhinestone image some traditionalists expected. He moved like a rock performer. He staged his concerts like major arena events. He pulled from a wider range of influences, and he didn't seem interested in asking permission. That made some people uncomfortable. There were critics who thought he was making country music too commercial, too big, too theatrical, too loud. In other words, too successful in ways they couldn't fully control. But that criticism eventually became part of the proof that he was onto something, because the things people complained about were the very things that helped country music become more mainstream than ever before. He took the genre out of the small box mindset and forced it into a larger cultural space. You could see it in the way he performed. You could hear it in the way he approached the songs. You could feel it in the scale of the audience response. Garth wasn't just singing to people, he was activating them. His concerts felt closer to rock shows than traditional country performances, and that was exactly why they worked. This was the kind of artist who could run across a stage, grab the crowd by the emotion, and hold them there until the final note. That kind of performance style doesn't just happen by accident. It comes from understanding that a live show is not a recital. It's an experience. And once people understood that, the growth became unstoppable. The irony is obvious now. The things the traditional gatekeepers disliked most about Garth Brooks became the things that helped country music reach a broader audience than ever before. He made the genre feel current without erasing its roots. He made it bigger without making it empty. And that balance is part of why his impact lasted. So what happens when an outsider's rebellion actually works? It doesn't just make you successful, it makes you a phenomenon. Once Garth Brooks broke through, the scale of his success became hard to even describe. He wasn't just selling records, he was defining an era. He became a crossover giant who pulled in listeners far outside the usual country audience. He turned every release into an event. He turned tours into cultural moments. He made country music feel like something you didn't have to explain to the rest of the world. You just had to turn it up. By the time he reached full superstardom, he wasn't operating on the level of a normal performer. He was operating on the level of a phenomenon. That's why people still talk about him the way they do. He wasn't merely successful inside a category. He expanded the category. He gave country music a bigger stage, a bigger audience, and a different kind of confidence. And because of that, he became one of the most important live performers of his generation. But success like that creates a strange kind of pressure. Because once you're that big, people don't just want your music. They want your time, your identity, your consistency, your presence. They want the version of you they fell in love with to stay frozen exactly as they remember it. And that's almost impossible for any human being, let alone one living under that level of attention. The bigger his career got, the smaller his private life had to become in order to survive it. And eventually, that pressure reached the most personal part of his world: marriage and fatherhood. One of the most important parts of Garth Brooks' story is also one of the quietest: his marriage to Sandy Mull. Before the fame was overwhelming, before the tours got bigger, before the schedule started consuming everything around it, Sandy was there. She was part of his life before the world treated him like a monument. That matters because it reminds us that the earliest stages of success don't happen in isolation. They happen inside real relationships, with real people who feel the pressure before the public ever notices it. But constant touring changes things. A marriage can only absorb so much absence before distance becomes its own kind of language. When one partner is always on the road and the other is holding down the center of family life, the relationship can start to tilt. Not because anybody is evil, not because anybody stops caring, but because a life built around public performance is hard to reconcile with a life built around domestic presence. That tension eventually became part of Brooks's reality. Their divorce in 2001 wasn't just a personal breakup. It was the emotional turning point that forced him to confront how much his career had taken from his home life. He later spoke openly about the toll success took on the marriage, and that honesty is part of what makes the story resonate. He wasn't just saying the schedule was busy. He was acknowledging that the life he built as a superstar had a human cost. But divorce doesn't end a story. It just changes who's left standing in the middle of it. And now, there were 3 daughters watching. This is where the story becomes even more emotional. For Garth Brooks, fatherhood wasn't just an identity. It became the reason for the major reset in his life. He didn't want to be the kind of father whose children only knew him from a distance, from TV appearances, from headlines, from concerts they saw once in a while. He wanted to be there for the ordinary life stuff. The school events, the birthdays, the quiet moments that don't make headlines but shape a child's memory forever. That's the part of his story that feels so relatable, because the emotional math is simple, even if the life itself isn't. You can chase greatness or you can be present. Sometimes you can do both, but not always, and not easily. And Garth reached the point where he could see that the years were passing while his daughters were growing up without him in the way he wanted to be there. That realization can hit harder than failure. It's one thing to miss a career opportunity. It's another thing to realize your children are becoming people and you're not around for enough of it. That was the emotional center of the decision he made in 2001. It wasn't about boredom. It wasn't about retirement in the usual sense. It was about choosing to be a father before he was a brand. That choice makes his story more human, not less. And it makes his decision to step away from music feel like more than a career move. It feels like an act of sacrifice. But that sacrifice was only one chapter: reinvention and retirement. Because even as he stepped back, another strange and risky chapter was about to begin. If you want to understand just how willing Garth Brooks was to take risks, you have to talk about Chris Gaines. This chapter is one of the strangest in his career, and that's exactly why it matters. Chris Gaines was his alter ego project, a reinvention that blended music, identity, image, and a level of creative ambition that confused a lot of people at the time. The idea was not small. There was talk of a movie. There was a pop-oriented persona. There was a different look, a different sound, and a different presentation that made fans ask a very obvious question. What exactly is Garth Brooks doing right now? The answer, in hindsight, is that he was trying to stretch the boundaries of who he could be as an artist. But the public reaction was mixed at best. Some people were intrigued, some were confused, some were openly mocking it. The whole experiment felt so strange that it became one of those celebrity moments that lives forever because it didn't behave like people expected it to. Fans who had grown used to one version of Garth suddenly found themselves staring at something that seemed almost intentionally disconnected from the man they knew. And that was the risk. Chris Gaines showed that Garth was not content to remain trapped in one image forever. He wanted to test reinvention. He wanted to see whether the audience would follow him into something more experimental. But the reaction also proved that even a superstar can misjudge how far the public is willing to go with him. Later, Brooks would admit that the project was misunderstood. And in a way, that's part of what makes it important, because not every bold idea lands cleanly. Not every creative gamble becomes a triumph. Sometimes the risk reveals a limit. Chris Gaines did exactly that. It reminded people that Garth Brooks was not just a hit-making machine. He was a complicated artist trying to evolve in public. But even musical reinvention couldn't fix what was breaking at home. And that's what made the next decision so much harder. By the time 2001 arrived, the emotional pressure had become too much to ignore. His marriage had ended. His daughters were growing up. His career had taken him to the top, but the cost of staying there was becoming impossible to dismiss. So when Garth Brooks stepped away from music, it wasn't some random act of exhaustion. It was the result of everything that had built up around him. He saw what the road had taken from him. He saw the distance. He saw the sacrifice. And he understood that if he kept going the same way, he might win the world and lose the life he actually wanted to live. That's why his retirement hit so hard. It wasn't just a pause. It was a surrender of momentum for the sake of something more personal. He chose to be there for his daughters. He chose to slow down. He chose to stop being a machine and start being a parent in a fuller way. That's an incredibly moving choice, but it's also a lonely one, because once you step away from the spotlight, the silence gets loud. The world moves on. The industry changes. Younger stars rise. The culture keeps spinning. And at some point, even the biggest names have to ask whether they'll ever belong to the old version of the stage again. A new chapter and the comeback. For Garth, that question would eventually lead to the comeback. But first, something steadier had to happen. He and Trisha Yearwood had known each other since the late 1980s, crossing paths in Nashville long before either of them was famous. Their friendship stretched across decades through both of their first marriages, before it finally turned into something more once those marriages ended. In May 2005, Brooks proposed to Yearwood on stage in front of thousands of fans. That December, the two married in a small private ceremony at their home in Oklahoma. For Yearwood, the marriage meant a real shift. She has said publicly that she stepped back from touring 200 days a year to actually be present, cooking dinner, going to soccer games, building a life with Brooks's 3 daughters rather than watching it from the road. That stability mattered. Brooks has often pointed to Yearwood as the reason he was willing to trust the stage again after walking away from it. She became not just his wife, but the partner who helped talk him back into the spotlight when he finally decided the time was right to return. And when he did return, the comeback was bigger than anyone expected. When Garth Brooks returned, it didn't feel like a novelty. It felt like the country music world had gotten its missing piece back. And what made the comeback so impressive was that it didn't happen with nostalgia alone. It happened with real force. He didn't just drift back in. He reasserted himself. He sold out shows. He pulled in huge audiences. He reminded people that the name still meant something, maybe even more than before, because of how long he had been gone. That kind of return is rare. Most artists disappear for a while and then come back smaller, quieter, or trapped in the shadow of their own earlier success. Garth came back with the kind of presence that made people remember why he had been so impossible to replace in the first place. Younger artists looked at him like a blueprint. Audiences treated his return like an event, and the legend continued. But even a successful comeback doesn't erase the emotional weight of what came before. It just proves the story wasn't over yet. Legacy and the real tragedy. So after everything, the rise, the reinvention, the collapse, the scandal, what's actually left behind? Before you can understand the tragedy, you have to understand the scale of what Garth Brooks actually accomplished. He is one of the best-selling artists in history. He sold more than 170 million records. He helped turn country music into stadium entertainment. He influenced generations of performers who came after him, including artists who grew up watching what he did on the live stage and then tried to build their own careers with that same sense of scale. His influence also reached beyond the artists who shared his genre. Brooks proved that country music could compete with the biggest names in pop and rock without abandoning its identity. His massive tours, elaborate stage productions, and willingness to think bigger changed what promoters, record labels, and performers believed was possible. Many of today's country stars entered the business in a world Garth had already reshaped, selling out football stadiums, crossing over to mainstream audiences, and treating concerts like full-scale productions became far more common because he showed there was an audience for it. Even artists who don't sound like Brooks have benefited from the doors he opened. That kind of impact is difficult to measure with awards or album sales alone. It lives on every time a country artist headlines an arena, launches an ambitious stadium tour, or reaches listeners who never considered themselves country music fans. His legacy isn't just the music he recorded. It's the larger stage he built for everyone who came after him. His impact isn't just about sales. It's about the way live country performance changed after him. It's about the fact that an entire generation of artists learned that country could be loud, theatrical, emotional, and massive without losing its heart. It's about the way he made the genre feel accessible to people who had never considered themselves country fans before. That matters because it means his life can't be reduced to one lawsuit, one cancellation, or one strange side project. His career changed the business. It changed the stage. It changed the expectations. And that's why the emotional weight of his later struggles is so strong. The bigger the legacy, the more the personal losses seem to echo. But if the legacy is this big, why does the story still feel so sad? That's the real question. It isn't that he became famous and miserable. That's too simple. It isn't that he made one bad decision and never recovered. That's too small. The real tragedy is that he kept trying to build a life where he could be everything at once. Superstar, father, husband, artist, reinvention machine, public figure. And every version of that life came with a loss attached to it. Imagine the alternate lives. In one version, he never steps away. He keeps touring, keeps winning, keeps building. But maybe the cost at home grows worse. In another version, he never comes back. He stays with his family and leaves the stage behind forever. But then, the music part of his identity stays unfinished, unresolved, almost like a song that never got its final chorus. In the real version, he tries to live somewhere in between. He steps away. He returns. learns. He risks reinvention. He takes hits. He keeps going. That's the version we got, and maybe that's what makes his story feel so heavy. Not because it's uniquely tragic compared to every other celebrity life, but because it shows how impossible it is to control the full meaning of success. You can make noble choices. You can sacrifice for the right reasons. You can try to protect what matters most. And life can still surprise you, still strain you, still complicate the story in ways you never planned for. That's the heartbreak. Not that Garth Brooks was weak, that he was human. And maybe that's the last thing worth understanding about him. There's another part of this story that matters too. Fame has a strange way of freezing people in time. Fans often remember Garth Brooks as the smiling superstar from the 90s, the one with the endless energy and the giant voice and the unstoppable stage presence. But the real man got older. His daughters grew up. Relationships changed. The music industry changed. The world changed. And yet, public memory often expects the same version of a person forever. That's where celebrity becomes cruel. It locks people into their brightest image while ignoring the years that pass behind the image. It wants the old energy without the old age, the old charm without the old pain, the old story without the complications that naturally come with living long enough to have one. Garth Brooks is living proof that fame doesn't stop time. It just makes the passage of time more visible. And that may be the most human part of all. Outro. So there you have it. The real story of Garth Brooks is not a shallow headline and not a single tragic moment. It's a long, complicated life built on ambition, sacrifice, reinvention, and the constant pressure of trying to live between two worlds. He rose from Oklahoma to become one of the biggest names in music history. He broke country's old rules. He changed live performance forever. He stepped away to protect his family. He took risks that didn't always work. He came back. He endured disappointment. And now he faces a legal controversy that has added even more weight to an already complicated legacy. That is not a simple life. That is a human one. And maybe that's why stories like this stay with us. Because when the glitter fades, what remains is the struggle to be both exceptional and ordinary at the same time. To be admired by millions while still trying to hold your own life together. Garth Brooks' story isn't over. But at 64, it already tells us something important. Greatness may get you remembered, but it doesn't save you from the cost of being human.